Sniper on the Eastern Front, the Memoirs of Sepp Allerberger. Chapter 2, A Sniper Emerges, Part 1.
Using the 8x magnification telescope with which the company commander had issued me, I surveyed the terrain extending from our trenches through the small gap between the parapet logs, but could make out nothing suspicious. Cautiously, I raised a rolled-up field tent, topped by a peaked field cap, above the logs, while I observed the Russian positions. Their sniper was probably inexperienced in the art, for he fired as soon as the field cap appeared. I saw the flash of fire from his carbine and the merest trace of smoke, and also detected the slight shimmer on the lens of his telescopic sight. Now I knew his position. In this first engagement, I had already shown my intuitive feel for the sniper's role. I made a mental note of the first rule of sniper combat: never fire at anything not positively identified. When allowed to fire at will, loose off only one shot from a lair, then either change location or at least desist temporarily from further activity and conceal yourself. My opponent remained where he was, awaiting a fresh opportunity, a fatal error for which he was to pay with his life. I placed the rolled tent on the parapet ledge as a rest for the forestock, and cautiously poked the muzzle of my carbine through the observation gap between the logs. I could not use the telescopic sight because the crack was too narrow. The Russian was about 90 meters away, within effective range for the weapon's fixed sights. I felt very nervous. The Jaeger were expecting a super-precise shot, and I was now confronted with the task, for the first time in my life, of deliberately aiming to kill a man in cold blood. Was this scrupulous? My throat was dry, my heart raced, and while aiming the weapon I noticed how it trembled in my hands. I could not fire the shot in this condition and held back, taking several deep breaths to compose myself. Colleagues surrounded me, watching with expectation. What could be worse? I settled the weapon into my shoulder once more, aimed carefully, and hesitated. "What are you waiting for? Let him have it," somebody said from several yards away. This evaporated my tension. In a dream, and with machine-like precision, I began to curl my trigger finger. Taking up the pressure, I breathed in, held my breath, and squeezed. The rifle cracked. A thick wisp of smoke drifted across the field of fire, obscuring my vision. A Jaeger, watching through another slit in the parapet log, shouted,
"You got him, man, right between the eyes. He's dead."
The news of the death of the Russian sniper spread like a forest fire through the trenches. Suddenly, MGs began to bark, carbines cracked, and somebody yelled, "Attack!" The Russians, completely surprised by our activity and the sudden assault by German troops, fled their advanced trenches for their main front line. We reached the abandoned positions without encountering resistance. In curiosity, a group of us made a short detour for the hide from where the Russian sniper had been operating. A scattered pile of logs beneath which he had dug a hollow, now a shallow, open grave for his body. Beside his feet was a trail of blood. Two Jaeger dragged the body free by the ankles. The Russian was a boy of about 16 with crew-cut hair. The bullet had entered through his right eye. A bloody mash of brain and bone splinters covered his upper torso at the back. The fist-sized exit wound in his head revealed that his skull had been cleaned of cerebral matter by the pressure wave of the rifle bullet.
"You hit him cleanly with a single shot, dear boy, and over open sights at almost 100 meters. You're good, Sepp,"
a Jaeger commented. I stared at my victim with a mixture of pride, revulsion, and bad conscience. All at once my stomach revolted and I vomited up my most recent meal of black bread, sardines in oil, and malt coffee. My colleagues reacted with sympathy and understanding for my lack of control. A blue-eyed NCO, 10 years my senior in years, head and shoulders above me in height and wearing a large reddish beard, comforted me with a striking North German accent.
"No need to be ashamed, old man. It has happened to the best of us. You just have to get over it. Better to sick up than shit your pants. As it happens, Papa has a remedy."
And at that, he withdrew a silvery schnapps flask from a breast pocket and offered me a slug. I took a mouthful and handed it back, thinking as I did so, "He looks like a Viking. The only things missing are the horns on his helmet." The idea of a Viking serving with the mountain troops amused me and made me smile. By now, the Soviets had gathered their wits and had begun a counterattack. An hour later, we were all back in the positions we had occupied earlier. I had passed the sniper's practical and was now accepted in the role by all and sundry. The admiration this engendered enabled me to shrug off the feelings of revulsion I still felt for my deed. I made a mental note of the second rule of sniper fieldcraft. War is a merciless system of killing and being killed. In action, sympathy for the enemy is ultimately suicide, for every opponent whom you do not kill can turn the tables and kill you. Your chances of survival are measured by the yardstick of how you compare in skill and objectivity as against your opponent. This was a principle to which I remained true throughout. If I had an enemy in the crosswires of my telescopic sight and a finger on the trigger, his fate was sealed. That same day I killed 2 other careless Russians. In youthful pride at my success, I used my pocket knife to make 3 notches in the stock of my rifle, a ritual I kept up while I had my Russian sniper rifle, and not until the death of a fellow sniper in action a year later did I abandon this suicidal habit. The same day, the Spies, Company Sergeant Major or CSM, told me that every kill claimed required a witness in the shape of an officer or NCO with the company command. Those kills outside offensive and defensive maneuvers in the fighting for trench positions would not count. I had to keep a small pocketbook listing my kills, and these also had to be confirmed by an officer or NCO. For every 10 confirmed kills, I would receive a 7 centimeters long and 1 centimeter wide strip of silver trim, such as NCOs wore along the edge of the jacket collar, and these were to be sewn on the lower left sleeve. Yet the obtaining of confirmation was often a difficult business. Many NCOs envied a sniper his success and refused to sign. Artillery spotters, especially young officers full of military idealism, considered Wehrmacht snipers as loathsome assassins and used the opportunity to express their undisguised antipathy by declining their signature. This was also the reason why few artillery spotters and snipers ever cooperated. Another reason for the institutional antipathy was the practice of snipers to dress up dummies in the garb of artillery spotters to lure enemy snipers' fire. We had the unofficial acquisition of tents and items from officers' uniforms off to a fine art. Over the ensuing 14 days, I scored another 27 kills. My new career was rapidly becoming routine, although as a greenhorn I had a certain amount of luck. My Russian counterparts had classified me as competent and tended to avoid my field of fire, and so our company's sector of the front remained relatively quiet. This gave me the opportunity to learn from my mistakes in the field, an advantage denied many other newcomers lacking battle experience who had been required to pay with their lives for a minor oversight. On or about the 18th of August, 1943, the long days of waiting came to an abrupt end. Days previous, the Soviets had stepped up their artillery bombardment, culminating in a major offensive the entire length of the Donets front. Impressively superior in numbers, they had soon penetrated the main German front line. We abandoned our positions, and, on the defensive, I was able to demonstrate how a good sniper could be of outstanding tactical significance. Although I had been at the front less than 2 months, I had the stoical calm and cold-bloodedness of the veteran infantryman. Even in very dangerous situations, I found I could keep my nerve and fight as if inspired. I was endowed with the skill of the warrior, something which theory cannot pass down, and which even the best training school is unable to inculcate. Battle proves the soldier in the mastery of personal fear and the natural impulse to turn and run. On the 27th of August, 1943, Hitler returned to his former FHQ Werwolf in Woodland north of Vinetza, where he met Generalfeldmarschall von Manstein, commanding General, Army Group South. The message was not a pleasant one for Hitler's ears. If Manstein could not be guaranteed another 12 divisions immediately, he would have to evacuate the Donets Basin. Since these did not exist, Hitler gave his tacit permission in promising him all units which can be made available. He then returned to FHQ Wolfschanze in East Prussia. 3. GD began a systematic and orderly retreat to the Dnieper, about 200 kilometers to the southwest. Matching 33 divisions against the 10 of the German side, bled of personnel and weapons, the Russians headed this vastly superior force towards the German lines where every kilometer was defended by no more than 90 infantrymen. To close the gaps, logistical and other rearward units were thrown forward. We had no reserves, nor strength in depth. If the Soviets breached the front, the effect would be immediate and calamitous. 3. GD was at the heart of the heaviest fighting, at Zaporizhzhia, where 2 separate Soviet columns were attempting to break through on the flanks in a pincer movement. Although GJR 144 was faced by an enemy 10 times stronger at the strategically important locations, the line of resistance held and afforded other units the opportunity to fall back and regroup. To frequently shifting strong points, the Russian offensive ground on for weeks until, at last, in September, the unpaved main highways and roads were transformed into a knee-deep, impassable morass by the early onset of the incessant rains of autumn. Chronic lack of sleep, problems of bringing up munitions and food, and the pressure to fight, and keep fighting made unceasing demands on our last physical reserves. It characterized our daily situation and remained the standard for the remainder of the war.